In this episode of the Houndsman XP podcast, we bring you houndsman and master falconer Paul Domski. Paul comes to us from New Mexico, and we sit down and chat with him about the ancient art of coursing dogs and the use of falcons in the pursuit of game. Hey, this is going to be really cool. Houndsmen date back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. There are drawings on cave walls of ancient man hunting with the use of his dog. And Paul capitalizes on this in two ways. One, he's using a dog, and the other is he is using a falcon. This is truly a sport of royalty. If you look at the history of Persian kings and the Arab lands and all through the Middle East, this was an art that was developed there. And that's where these dogs come from as well that Paul uses. He is using a Saluki. So we're going to talk about the breeding, the historical breeding of Salukis, how they were used in the old country, and how Paul is using them now in the 21st century in New Mexico in the high desert plains. And he adds that twist of being a falconer. So he's using birds of prey to assist his dogs as well. This is an exciting episode. It is really outside the box of what we traditionally think of as houndsmen, but what an important story. The Houndsman XP podcast was created to bring unity among all houndsmen. In order to do that, we have to be able to tell that story. We need to be able to talk about all of the great things that we can do with our hounds, whether it's a sin hound, big game hound, coon hound, rabbit hound, or a side hound. It's all important if we intend to stand united in the future for the houndsman lifestyle. So please stay tuned for this episode. It's a great episode. We're going to talk about catching hawks. We're going to talk about Salukis. We're going to talk about modern breeding practices among the sidehound crowd and really bring some exposure to this untalked about segment of our houndsman community. We really appreciate your time today, sharing it with us, and enjoy this episode with Paul Domski. Welcome to the Houndsman XP podcast, and we are back with a episode of epic proportions because my high-energy co-host, associate Seth Hall is lined up, another guest, and he's on the mic, and it's always exciting when Seth's around. How you doing, Seth?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad to be here, everyone.
What are you doing down there? I'm watching your weather right now, and you guys are hovering around the mid-90s for the next 10 days. You guys run at night down there, or what are you doing?
Right now, my dogs are in the off-season. They are now world-class couch potatoes. So then the hares need to breed, so we give them a break during the spring and summer, and our dogs get to just recuperate, gain a couple lazy pounds, and hang out and just kind of watch the rabbits hop around the outside the fence and get ready for the next season.
Yeah, but the short time that I've known you, Seth, there is no downtime for you. So what are you doing?
Okay, so I am sweating mostly. But we mostly wait until nightfall or right around nightfall to go out and do exercise. So I take them for a walk every day in the desert shrubland that I live in. It's terrible for any like rabbit coursing, but they'll see them everywhere, and they'll take off after very, very short races, which is good. I don't want them going hard in the heat. And they'll just kind of keep sharp and stay in shape and get to stretch their legs, but don't do anything crazy. And sometimes if I have time, which is rare, I'll get up in the early morning and let them exercise. But most of the time, the summertime is all about replenishing our rabbits and healing injuries and pep talks, lots of Rocky music playing in the background, lots of montages of rabbits running on the screen, you know what I mean? Yeah. And getting psyched and amped ready for next season. Honestly, it's pretty lame. I wish I could run longer. All my coon hunting friends are showing me pictures of them still going out at night, and I'm like, so jealous.
You need to get a coon hound.
I do. That's what I need. I need more dogs.
You only need one good coon hound.
That's an excellent upside. That is something that I've been talking to a lot of my scent hound buddies, and we always love to weigh the pros and cons of our particular sport. I just think that's really interesting stuff to talk about, and that is absolutely an upside of coon hunting, is that one good coon dog and he can hunt for so many years and give you excellent service and only get better with age. And honestly, a coursing dog really starts to decline after about 5, at least in my experience. So,
yeah. How are you guys faring out there with, hopefully this pandemic thing is winding down. You know, as we record this, we're right in the end of April here, but Indiana's looking at starting to open things up this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so El Paso actually is our neighbor, and El Paso's having a surge in cases right now. Them being next door to Juarez is they're not having a good time either. We're just gonna kind of see what's going on, and hopefully that stays in El Paso. But obviously, there's a lot of flow back and forth between Las Cruces and El Paso, so we will see. I'm staying pretty socially distant. Luckily, my work keeps me very socially distant, and I'm just being a hermit, hanging out with my wife and my dogs. Yeah. So
you don't want to catch anything from an aoudad.
No, I do not. I don't think I'd catch COVID from one, but I could maybe get brucellosis or something from one. Who knows?
Yeah. So let's talk about plagues and things. Like you had a bout with a pretty serious injury or disease. What was it? Bubonic plague?
Yes, it was.
Was
actually.
It? See, I only thought that was like a myth. I thought that was something ancient times ago. I joke about it. You know, it's if I get a cold or something, I'll tell people I've got the plague, but you've actually had it. Yeah, I thought that died out with it, like knights and castles and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we do an annual rodent survey at my work, and we handle hundreds of wild rats, if not thousands. Well, among the crew, thousands, but myself, hundreds. And my wife jokes that I have the best Renaissance fair costume in the world now. I can just go as myself and be a bubonic plague survivor. So, but yeah, it was just crazy. People are always like, "Whoa, you had the plague. What's that like?" And I was like, "It was expensive and painful and pretty scary, honestly."
So tell me how it happened. I mean, you're handling rats, and that's weird all in of itself. We take great care to avoid being in contact. As anyone knows, the plague's vector is fleas. So a vector is what transfers a disease from its host to another host. And so fleas carry bubonic plague. And plague is a bacteria. Yersinia pestis is its scientific name. And it lives in the digestive tract of a flea, and what it actually does is makes a physical plug in the flea's digestive system, which causes the flea to feel malnourished but also very nauseous. So it eats ravenously, but then so when the flea is eating ravenously, they suck blood. So it's drinking copious amounts of blood, but then it has extreme nausea, which causes it to vomit that blood. And so when a flea jumps off a rat and jumps onto me, he took a bite of me, decided that he had a stomach ache, and barfed in my bloodstream, and now I have bubonic plague. And so what happened is honestly, and this is the truth, these aren't like sewer rats, what everyone's thinking. These are like desert rats, kangaroo rats and pack rats and things that live way out in the deep desert with no human contact, right?
And or extremely little human contact. And normally they have a very low flea load. And so this was 4 years ago. That year, the flea load was surprisingly high, even on our kangaroo rats. And I was like, what's going on? So there's a red flag. And also our population was very low when we were having a great year of rain. So I was like, uh-oh. Like anytime you have low loads of rats when the weather is good, that's not a good sign. And so I was like, uh-oh, we're paying attention now, because if I start to feel kind of woozy, maybe I could get some kind of hantavirus is usually the first thing that you think of. And so I had a cold. That's not the
first thing I think of, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I had a running cold for like 2 weeks, and I was like, it's just a cold. It's just a cold, And I remember I got home, and I wasn't feeling very good. And I was like, I'm just going to pop these dog antibiotics and just kind of see where I go.
Do what? What? Oh, wait. What? You had antibiotics there from your dogs from the vet?
Well, so okay, it's for people and dogs. It was just amoxiclav, which is amoxicillin and clavinate mixed together, which is very common for humans and dogs. It was just at a dog dose, so I just ate more. But I was very careful to get my milligrams per pound correct.
Right.
Anyway, so I ate these antibiotics, and I was like feeling better the next day, and I was like, oh, that's not good. So I was like, because plague is a bacterial disease. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh man, maybe. And so I was still in denial, because I was like, there's no way, and I was just like, whatever. So I felt better the next day. And then about a day and a half later, I just crashed. I went downhill so fast. And I remember I went to open a barbed wire gate, and I reached my arm through the gate pile, and I felt my arm like hit the gate, and it just like serious pain under my armpits. And my lymph nodes in my armpits had like quadrupled in size, and just on my right side. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And so
no doubt.
Yeah. And so I felt the other side, and they were all normal, and the ones under my jaw were all normal. So I was like, oh crap. And I remember I worked the whole day. I got home. My wife was like, you look horrible. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I was already, now I was starting to believe her. She's like, we should go to the hospital. I was like, nah, it's too expensive, whatever. And so I went to lift up a laundry basket full of clothes, and I could barely lift it. I was like so weak, and then I almost collapsed into the wall. And my wife was like, we're going to the hospital. And I was like, okay, fine. So I get to the hospital, and you know how it always is at the hospital. There's always like helicopter moms, and they're like kids with the sniffles and stuff. And I look like death walking. I like go into the hospital. I walk up to the counter, and of course it's this apathetic like receptionist that's just like, can I help you? And I'm like, okay, I'm a wildlife biologist. I've been pretty sick for about 2.5 weeks. I've handled thousands of wild rodents in the last 3 weeks. I'm pretty sure I have bubonic plague. Yeah,
I've got the plague.
Yeah, her eyes like widened, and she like was like, come back immediately. And so I went back there.
So so there's a few things here that I got to backtrack on before we get too far into the story. And this isn't all we're going to talk about today. We've actually got a guest today, but this is funny. So one is you haven't been a government employee long enough, because you don't have to have swollen lymph nodes to take a sick day when you're a seasoned government employee.
Oh yeah. No, this was all me. Yeah, this was 100% me.
I mean, you can find reasons to stay home. I've got a hangnail. I might get sick about noon. There's a post meeting today, so I probably am feeling a little bit ill anyway. There's all kinds of reasons that you can stay home as a government employee. Did I lose you? You've muted yourself and you've bowed out of the conversation.
Oh my goodness, no! I don't know how my mic muted itself. That's weird. My hand was away from the keyboard.
The difference between me and you is I'm retired, so I can say stuff like that, and you're not. So if somebody listens to this and they laugh, they'll think, well, Seth, maybe we need to call you in for some corrective counseling.
Yeah, so I actually had some new guy fervor at the time. Let's just be honest. And I also I didn't want to leave my team hanging, because our rodent trapping is a lot of work. And so I just wanted to make sure that the crew had me there to help. And I'm kind of the lead guy for the rat trapping crew. So Jeez. I wanted to make sure I was there to help. But also, I was in denial. And the cold, like, so the way the disease works is you have pre-symptoms for up to 2 weeks. And they're just like a mild flu. And it truly was pretty mild. It pops some Dayquil and man up. You know what I mean? You're fine.
Right.
And then you crash and you have this wicked fever. And then when that happens, your lymph nodes swell up to the size of chicken eggs and explode. And that is when you die. So,
nice.
Yeah. So
let's just push that to the limit.
Yeah. So, it was alarming how quickly my lymph nodes swole up. That was what I found the most alarming. They went from being relatively normal to about the size of my thumbnail in like a day, 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like this, and it hurts a lot. Like I was surprised at how painful that was. Anyway, so I got to the doctor, and I remember when I got back in the waiting room, they hooked me up to all this masks. They drew 11 vials of my blood. They were testing me for everything, and I was a huge celebrity. There was a gunshot victim in there, and they were ignoring that guy. Like they were like, I want to go talk to this plague guy.
Yeah, we see gunshots all the time. Let's go talk to this medieval dude with the bubonic plague.
Yeah, and then they just go there and just see some skinny, dorky redneck sitting there, really. And so, all the doctors are questioning me, and all these nurses were coming in, and they looked like they were wearing spacesuits, because there's a form of plague called pneumonic plague, which is in your lungs, and it's extremely, extremely contagious and also very deadly. And so they wanted to make sure I didn't have that. And then they were asking me if I had rabies. One of the doctors was like, have you been bitten? Have you been bitten? And I was like, no, I haven't been bitten, like, by anything. And then, like, it was like I was bit by a werewolf or something, you know? Right. And then, anyway, by the end of it, my discharge. So there's so many doctors coming to see me and talking to me, and I had the same story the whole time. And long story short, one nurse comes in. She starts opening up my mouth and looking at all my teeth. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is going on? And I thought she was looking at my gums or something. And then, like, an hour and a half later, I was reading my discharge paperwork. Oh, by the way, they just hooked me up to a bunch of doxycycline through an IV. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful gram-negative antibiotic. Right. And yeah, it made me feel really sick. Like, I was barfing everywhere and stuff. But afterwards, I felt great. And I was like, I am so glad it's 2017. And so, yeah, within 72 hours, I felt normal. It took about 6 weeks for my lymph nodes to return back to the normal size. But yeah, I felt amazing pretty quick. And I was like, man, I am so happy I live in the 2000s. Well,
I'm going to share a little secret. Okay, so I've got this phobia of rats. Oh. They are from the devil. They have there is no reason to have rats in this world. And it started developing when I was a kid. We had on the farm, and you would go out to feed, and you'd throw open the feed bin, and there'd be a rat in there, and it'd jump out and it'd scare the snot out of you. Well, we learned to deal with that. We waited for him. You just start carrying I'd carry my .22 rifle out there, and the rat would run up on the beam, and I'd shoot it and kill it, and then I'd get some vindication out of the whole thing. And it turned into a challenging thing. But when I went to Desert Storm, we were in some bunkers. We went out and built these bunkers and stuff. Well, it didn't take long for the rats to figure out. And somebody would leave part of an MRE in there, or something stupid. And it didn't take long for these rats to figure out that was a neat place for them to hang out. There were nice little tunnels built for them, and, places of concealment. And occasionally some dumb jarhead would leave something in the hole for them to eat. So you'd be in there and you'd be trying to sleep, because you'd be on watch and then you'd be off watch, and, you'd alternate. You wake up a few times and there's, Ben, the black rat, sitting on your chest, sitting there eating an MRE cracker, staring you in the face. And it was just like, holy crap, I am done with this. And you didn't sleep the rest of the night. So needless to say, command didn't take it real serious, because when there's rats in the hole, you don't sleep when you're supposed to be on watch. So yeah, you stay awake.
I will take your rat phobia and I will cure you of it, because a kangaroo rat is the most harmless, adorable little rat you've ever seen. I bet. Yeah, they just look like a gerbil. Mm-hmm. They look like a cuter version of a gerbil, and they are completely harmless. You can literally just reach into the live trap and grab them with your bare hands and just hold them in your hand and put an ear tag on them and let them go. They're not like, when you catch them, they're just like, I'm dead, and they just give up immediately. Wow. And so, like, they're not like a pack rat. If you try, it's like a pit bull in there. You try to reach in there and grab that thing, it'll chew your hand off. But a kangaroo rat, they're pretty much the most harmless, adorable animal in the world.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I'm not rat when you guys come coursing with us, I'll catch you one so you can see it and you can hold it.
We're gonna have to do it, because I do believe in facing your phobias. But yeah, I might try that. But Norwegian wharf rats and all that garbage, no thanks.
No, thank you. Yuck. I'll pass on that too.
You know what we got going on today? We do have a guy that's taken some time out of his schedule. I'm going to let you introduce our guest today. I think this is it's older. He practices hunting practices that are older than the bubonic plague. So
yeah, very much so. Yes,
go for
indeed.
it, Seth.
Well, this is my guest today. His name is Paul Domski. I met Paul. Paul's been a figure in the coursing community for some time, and I had seen him on social media for a long time, and he had commented a couple times on some of my pictures I had taken, and we'd had some very pleasant interchanges over the years. But just very recently, I decided I just wanted to kind of freshen up my viewpoint and talk to someone that's completely outside of the circle I normally talk to. And so I just reached out to Paul, and we had a really good conversation over the last probably 4 months maybe. And I really enjoyed talking to him a lot, and I thought he had really interesting viewpoint and just a neat way of looking at things that was totally different than what I was used to. And so he was nice enough to ask if I wanted a puppy, and that was actually way after I'd been talking to him for some time. And so that cute little puppy I posted on the Houndsman XP website was from Paul. And so I'm very thankful, and I'm glad to have you here, Paul. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect.
Okay, great. No, it's great to be here. This is all new to me, so if I sound a little nervous, you'll forgive me.
You'll only sound nervous a little bit, trust me. I was only nervous for the first about 5 minutes on mine. So
okay. Good deal.
And we kind of feed on that too. So it's like a feeding frenzy. When we get a guest that acts a little nervous, then we just start piling on. So no pressure at all, Paul.
I can totally relate. Excellent. Well, good deal.
Well, we can start it off by a nice, easy question. Paul, tell us about yourself, and how old are you, where you live, and just tell us about yourself.
Man, let's see. I'm 57. I live east of Albuquerque, so central New Mexico. I've got my undergraduate degree in geology and a graduate degree in geochemistry. I work as a government contractor on nuclear waste issues. I'm also a falconer. I've been a falconer for almost 21 years. And it was through falconry that I got into sight hounds about 18, 19 years ago. And, they're both huge passions of mine. And they, as my wife can attest, they kind of, they take over your lives in good ways and sometimes bad.
You don't have to tell us that.
I'm fortunate to live in a pretty good place to do both those things. So, I try to take advantage of my situation as much as possible.
Where did you say you live, Paul?
I live in the town of Hares, about 20 miles east of Albuquerque.
Okay, so you're in New Mexico as well. Great wide open spaces out there. I can really see a guy getting into falconry. So I'm sure we'll get into this, but so I know that falconry is broken down into apprentice and goes all the way up to master falconer, type stuff. So just kind of walk us through that part a little bit. Where are you at on that scale? You've been in falconry for how long?
For going on 21 years.
Okay.
And, there's three levels of permitting. So there's the apprentice level, there's the general level, and then there's the master level. And just because you have a master's permit doesn't necessarily make you a master.
Right.
It's like I consider myself, a student of falconry, and just when just like everything else in life, once you feel like you've gotten into it pretty deep, you realize how little you actually know. And I can say that's true from the hound side of things as well.
That's a great message.
But with regard to falconry, I got into it when I was a kid, about 10, 12 years old. I had a bird, and that a neighbor had provided, and from there, I was a kid, and life got in the way, growing up, going to school and whatnot. And then once I was married and had a settled life, I got back into falconry and found a local guy who's willing to be my sponsor. Tom Smiley was kind of a legend in the sport. And it's just gone from there, taken off from there. I don't know.
You always hear about
hours, but I would put everybody to sleep.
You always hear about guys that fly, but you're the first person I've ever actually been up close to that has birds. And when I first saw your birds in the pins, I was like, man, yeah, it's the real deal. And I mean, it's so weird. I've never met anyone who got into coursing after they got into something as high level as birds. So why did you get into coursing after flying, Paul?
Well, because they're both they're both very ancient sports, and I'm a big fan of a writer who lives in New Mexico, Steve Bodio, and back in the early 2000s, well, around 2000 probably, I read a book of his called Querencia, which basically is just sort of a memoir of his early years living in New Mexico. And he had coursing hounds, and he lives in the town of Magdalena, which is it's way out in the middle of nowhere, west of Socorro. And he talks about the coursing hounds, and he talks about one of his big influences, which was Dutch Salmon, who's a well-known houndsman and sportsman in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned that Dutch had owned a bookstore in Silver City, New Mexico. And one time when my kids were little, my wife and I and the kids were on spring break down there, and I happened to look up Dutch, and we hit it off real well. And I bought his book on coursing and really got the bug. And a couple months later, he offered me a dog, and the rest, as they say, is history, really.
Yeah, Dutch is, man, I devoured his book. I mean, I heaped a bunch of praise on him in my podcast, so I don't want to sound like I'm gushing again, but I only got to meet him for a very short time in the eve of his life, but he was a huge inspiration for me to want to write more, because I love writing. Yeah. I loved his book. Oh my gosh, he's written a ton of books, but his book on coursing, gaze hounds in particular, I just devoured that book, and I loved his writing style. And he got around a bit. Luckily for me, he knew David Heiss and Justin Heiss, so I got to meet him through them as well. But obviously he got around, and his message really got through the community, and he was a big inspiration for me. So
Likewise.
Did you get your first dogs from him? Is that what you said?
Yeah. He gifted. He gave this long dog. It was staghound and greyhound and Saluki, and it looked very much like a Saluki. And that dog was he was really special to my family. I mean, he was like, I remember when we brought him home, my wife was like, "You got to be kidding! We can't have." We had Australian Shepherds at the time, and
not catching much rabbits at them.
no, not even trying. And and this dog was like an alien. He looked different. He behaved completely different. I mean, he was a hunting dog for Dutch, so he lived in a kennel, and we're kind of house dog people, and which goes against the general sports dog.
I'm there with you. I got him inside too. So
yeah, and this dog, his name was Badger. He was just unbelievable, and it took a little while, but the bonds he built with my family, my wife in particular, and my kids was just unbelievable. He was just really loyal. He was a great protector of the family, and I used to use him at the time. I was flying a lot of goshawks, and we'd go out hunting, cottontails and jacks with the goshawks, and it's where I got my first taste of using the combination of a dog and a bird together, and that was really neat. And we had some fun times back then.
Could he catch a pretty rock hard rabbit? Was he good?
I never ran him as a solo. I didn't know anybody then who had these dogs. Mm-hmm. Dutch had given me a couple names of people locally, like Chris Mason, for example, who's a legend in the Saluki world, who just lived a few miles away at the time. But Chris had a very busy career at the time and was very busy with doing her thing with the dogs. And it wasn't until a few years later that I actually got to meet people and find out that there's a bunch of them right around where I live who run dogs on a regular basis.
That surprised me a bunch, is how many people are actually around us that hunt this way still. I thought it was kind of a dead sport.
Yeah, it's definitely an underground sort of thing. And but yeah, no, he was a great dog. I really couldn't tell you how his abilities were, though, because at the time I wasn't a good judge, and I
didn't have the eye.
Didn't have anybody to judge him against. Yeah.
So here's my question then, and I'm sure all our listeners are wanting to know. Tell us how a sight hound and a hawk hunt together, because when I found out people do that, That's pretty next level. So just walk us through how you hunt with a hawk and a speed dog at the same time.
Well, I think it's probably one of the oldest forms of hunting that exists to mankind. I mean, I'll take a little bit of a sidebar here, but humans have been hunting on like the steppes of Asia for eternity, right? Since humans have been around. And they probably around then were domesticating horses and dogs, were domesticating humans, horses, and dogs probably all domesticated each other at around the same time. And seeing it firsthand many times, I believe that what happened was, there was a hunting party out and they had their dogs, and maybe a hare got up or a gazelle or something, and an eagle or a falcon came in and partook in the hunt. And I believe that's how this whole thing got started with falconry. And it probably happened in several places around the world simultaneously. So when guys like me, or there's actually several of them in New Mexico who hunt with sight hounds and falcons, when you go out and do it, I mean, you've seen good jackrabbit chases, what's going on. These guys will release a falcon, and so they're walking along. We're pretty much doing it always on foot. You get a slip on a hare and the dogs take off. You pop the hood off the falcon, which is like a leather helmet, which keeps them calm on your fist while you're walking. And the bird will take off and start chasing after the hounds, and they gain a little altitude, and then they come in on an angle and take shots at the hare. And, all it takes is one little blow to set the rabbit off balance, and the dog can come in and grab it. A lot of times the hares are extremely fast. Boy, they should be wearing helmets because they can't take a blow to the head. If a falcon just comes in and taps it on the head, they pretty much are dead. Whether it breaks their neck or it does something that they're not accustomed to. They cannot handle it. So it's an extremely efficient type of hunting. I mean, it's your kill percentages go way up when you add a falcon to the mix, or a hawk for that matter. So
yeah. It's amazing how specialized hares are, because I mean, everyone knows a jackrabbit's fast, but just to see the footwork they can put down on a predator is incredible. And I'm imagining them pulling a bunch of unique moves that I've never seen against a bird that they wouldn't have done against dogs. I mean, what's the craziest thing you've seen them do to escape the birds?
Well, I'll send you some video. But it's completely different when you're hunting a bird alone on jacks. They're not going full speed. They'll pull all kinds of tricks out. They'll do off-speed maneuvers, so they'll just run up to a sagebrush and stop, and the bird's got so much momentum it just flies right by, and then the hare can turn around and run away. When there's a dog chasing them, they don't have that opportunity.
I see.
And a lot of times with just a bird, the rabbit will run in a tight circle, maybe 20-foot diameter, and it just stalls the bird right out.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Or a lot of times the bird will come in behind it, and you know how the hares have peripheral vision that's pretty much 180 degrees.
Yep.
The hare will jump straight up, and the bird will go underneath it.
It's just what?
Oh, you see that? That's probably the most common maneuver you see.
And you've got video of this?
Yeah, not of my birds, but a good friend of mine is really good videographer who's got lots of it.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. I mean, I got a huge soft spot for rabbits. I know just because we're hunting them, you wouldn't think that, but jackrabbits are just so badass. And oh man, like that's cool. That's awesome. I want to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you see some interesting things. You really do. I mean, it's a lesson in natural history, really, because you just get to see it more frequently than you do if you're out walking.
Definitely.
So I want to kind of drill down into the falconry side a little bit, if you'll allow me to do that a little bit, Paul, because I think it's something that it is an ancient sport. and you know, such an old traditional type thing, and it's very unfamiliar to especially 21st century hunters, but you know, in modern times it's misunderstood. So you mentioned the permit levels, and I get totally what you were saying there about your apprentice, your general, and your master. And I really appreciated what you said about being a student, because that's one thing that we've tried to say about being a houndsman. You know, you never stop learning, and it's just a life thing too.
Right.
You just never stop learning and developing your skill set. So, but how did you acquire your first birds? That's an interesting story. I've got a little bit of, I'm going to act like I know nothing here. Because I really don't know a whole lot, but I do have some familiarity with it from my past profession and knowing a few falconers. So how did you get your first birds?
Well, you know, by the federal regulations, so falconry is controlled both at the federal and state level. So the federal regulations and probably 90% of the states, they require that when you get started as an apprentice your first year, that you actually trap birds from the wild and you use them. So, and the birds that you trap are first year birds. So you will trap like a red-tailed hawk. Mm-hmm. And typically you're allowed two types of birds. You're either allowed a red-tailed hawk, which is people are very familiar with. You see them around a lot. They're very common raptor in North America. Or American kestrel, and kestrel is the smallest falcon that we have in North America. And there's a lot of them around, but they don't make good apprentice birds for a bunch of reasons, which we can talk about later. Let's just go with the red tail scenario for now. So red tails are nice sized birds. They weigh 2 to 3 pounds, which, you know, they look huge, but they don't really weigh that much. You see them commonly on fence posts or on phone poles and so forth. And, you know, they breed through the summer, and then their young disperse. And the mortality rate in general on first year raptors, whether it's a golden eagle or a red tail or a kestrel, is usually around 80%. So 80% of the birds that are born any given year die, mm-hmm. which is extremely high. So mm-hmm. They allow falconers to trap these birds and fly them. And given that there's so few falconers in the country, it really has no impact on their wild population. So, yeah, in order to trap a first-year bird, you know, you wait until fall when the birds start to move on migration, and October is a good month. And you know, you drive down country roads and you look for them, and you carry a trap with you. And there's several different kinds of trap, but the most basic one.
This is what I wanted to get into right here. This is cool.
Yeah, the most basic one's called the balsha tree, or a BC. It's called, just, you know, people call them BCs. It's an ancient form of trap that was originally done in India. I think it literally means umbrella in some Indian language. So it's a hardware cloth dome, essentially, is one popular shape. And what you do is you get fishing line and you tie monofilament nooses on it. I don't know, the noose is maybe 2.5 inches in diameter, and you use 20 or 30 pound test, some nice, you know, high quality line. You want mid quality line, to put it that way. You don't want super limp line that's just going to lay down. You want stuff that's going to stand up. Mm-hmm. And you tie 50, 60, 100 nooses, depending on how ambitious you are. And some people are pretty ambitious because they get so excited about trapping season. And you get, you know, if you're lucky, you get one of, and you live in New Mexico, you get one of Seth's native rats that he enjoys playing with so much.
Right.
A kangaroo rat, or actually most people use mice or a gerbil. You know, gerbils are good because they come in natural colors. And you get a gerbil and you put it in the trap, and you drive down these country roads, and you're scoping birds constantly. And it's amazing how, with a little practice, you see every bump on every pole turns into your future hawk. Yeah. Can't believe how many insulators I've seen that I thought were hawks. But anyway, so you're driving along, and you scope out a bird, and you make a positive ID that it's a a first-year red tail, and you can tell by their plumage. They don't have a red tail for one, and they've got just different color plumage than an adult. And you drive past them, and you make sure the situation is safe. You're not going to do this on a busy highway. And you set the trap down on the shoulder of the road or just in the grass where the bird can get a view of it. And hopefully that gerbil is running around, and the hawk, is up there on the pole, and it bobs its head a couple times and lifts its tail, and we call it muting. That's when they poop. And they take off, and that's typically what they do before they launch an attack.
Lightening the load.
Lightening the load, just like our dogs do when we're out in the field.
Yep.
And they jump off the pole, and they come in gliding, and they'll hit the trap, and they get on it, and they're grabbing at that thing with their feet. They're footing it, we call it. And, they get a noose stuck on their toes or a bunch of nooses, and you can tell by the way they're acting from a distance when you park a quarter mile away in your car, your truck, and typically by their behavior, if they're trapped. Mm-hmm. And, you go running up there, and, I carry with me when I'm doing this, I carry a big beach towel, and you throw the beach towel over the bird, and you secure the bird and put a leather hood on it to calm it down, and that's how you get your bird.
Are they trying to bite you? Because you're saying just put a leather hood on it like it's casual, but I'm imagining a knife on its face trying to attack you. I mean,
in general, they're more active with their feet. It's their feet you have to watch out for.
Oh, okay.
Some birds can be bitey, but in general, red tails are pretty good. They won't bite you necessarily so much. I mean, obviously they're all individuals, so they're going to behave differently, but no, they're after you with their feet. And when they're on a trap and you run up to them, they flip over onto their back, so it's really easy to just control their legs. You just reach in with one hand and control their legs, and flip the hood over their head, and close the braces, and untangle them from the trap, and then secure them. So
I imagine something as powerful as a golden eagle can do some serious damage with those feet. So
yeah. And actually yesterday, the last couple of days, I've had the privilege of helping out with a bird that was a golden eagle, a female golden eagle. She weighed in at about 12 pounds.
Wow.
Which is a very large golden eagle. She was shot. And she got extremely lucky. The person who shot at her was a bad shot. And they were using a shotgun, and instead of killing her, they destroyed her primary feathers on one wing, so she couldn't fly well. And Game and Fish trapped her up and brought her into a rehab place. And they called me to help them find a falconer that could manage the bird for the next year or two until the bird's, flying and hunting again. So yesterday morning, I got to go down and pick up this bird. I mean, its feet are about as big as my hand.
Oh, man. Dang.
Yeah, just huge. I mean, and their talons are like scimitars that are, 2 inches long. The talons, just the nail itself,
Wow.
It's just an impressive animal. So anyway, that was a little sidetrack there. I don't know. Did I answer your question about trapping?
Yeah, absolutely. So
definitely.
it's some of the traps I've seen kind of look like a football. Made out of that with the loops on it, and you put your bait inside the trap. And I'm vaguely familiar with that. But you said slip the braces on. Explain what a brace is.
Well, yeah. So the hood has the little ties on the hood are called braces. But then on the bird itself, you put leather anklets around its legs, the tarsus of the legs, which is just the arm part, and then you thread jesses through the anklets. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, falconry has its own very ancient language that we all speak.
Right.
Yeah.
So all the equipment has special names. So there's anklets. They're called the almires that go around the leg, and you put just a strap of leather, and then you put a brass grommet through that to close it. so that holds it on there. So a brass eyelet, we call them grommets, and then you thread straps through the eyelet, and those are called jesses. And then you put a swivel on the end of the jesses, and then that's attached to a leash. And then you tie that to your glove or to a perch, and that's how the birds are secured.
Yeah, there's a whole process for going through about, getting a bird to eat out of your hand and things like that. And I know we could fill up a whole podcast with this, but I just wanted to lay down some interesting facts, but some basic facts so that people understand what the process is. And not everybody can just go out and say, I'm going to be a falconer. I'm going to trap my bird. You've got to have flight pins. You've got to have certain things set up before you even get to that part. And it's definitely an interesting facet of hunting that isn't talked about enough, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and that's very true. I mean, and, and we can all appreciate the recruitment effort of hunters. I mean, hunting in general, where the numbers are going down, and our highly specialized forms of hunting, like with hounds, whether it be coon hounds or bears or lions, or chasing jackrabbits with sight hounds, and falconry. I mean, those are all forms of hunting that are old and highly specialized, and trying to recruit new hunters is something we're always conscious of, but it's something that it can be a double-edged sword sometimes, simply because, people aren't committed to it, and they can sometimes do more harm than good. And it's very difficult to recruit.
Yeah. It's one of those deals where you're like, let's get some more hunters, but just not falconers.
Right.
Exactly. Because you can't afford to have somebody that's not committed to it, just deciding one day on a whim that I'm going to go out and become a falconer. And you got to be dedicated to that. And it's the correlation to me is the same. There are several correlations and parallels with being a houndsman. It's a level of dedication. And I've said this before, and it's not to bring slight to any other hunting group at all, but I turkey hunted this past week. I took my shotgun out of the safe on Tuesday evening and made sure that everything was functional, and then I hunted with it. I can't do that with a hound. I can't do that with a raptor if I'm a falconer. Nope. It's an everyday commitment, and that's really what is missing in our message as houndsmen and hunters. This is an everyday commitment. This is not, I can hang my bow on the wall, I can put my gun in the safe, and very little has to be done in between. Get the bow off the wall a few weeks before season and start shooting it. Now, I know dedicated archers that shoot every day, and they're phenomenal. And I think that's where we should all look to be. It's not just simply, I'm going to start today, and there's a commitment, daily commitment. Glad to hear it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a relationship.
Yep.
And you have to maintain it.
Exactly.
Let's talk about dogs a little bit, because a lot. We got to talk about dogs a lot because this is a Houndsman XP podcast. But so I first became aware of Salukis because I got my worked on my bachelor's degree at Southern Illinois University.
Well, of course, you're a Saluki
at Carbondale, and became familiar with what a Saluki was. But that's the only thing I know. He was like the mascot that showed up at ball games and stuff. That's what it meant to me at the time. But being a houndsman, I looked into it and became intrigued with it. But I'm just going to sit back and let you and Seth talk about Salukis.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Paul, well, as you know, in the long dog community, so a long dog, to the listeners that are like, what? A long dog is a cross between two or more different sight hound breeds. So a lurcher is when you cross a working dog to a sight hound. So we're not hunting with lurchers. They're too slow for a jackrabbit. We're hunting with long dogs, greyhounds, and Salukis. And so Paul is very renowned in the coursing community for having really high quality Salukis. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to reach out and hear Paul's story when I first started talking to him. And so, Paul, I guess the reason I want to ask you is, how did you get into Salukis? Besides, I mean, we know you met Dutch and things, but how did you get into Salukis specifically, and what drew you to them?
Well, yeah, I mentioned the first dog that Dutch had given to my family, and he was very Saluki-like, and we had him for a few years, and he developed osteosarcoma, and it got to the point we had to have him put down. And it was really hard on my family, and my wife was like, no more dogs, no more dogs. And I don't know, a couple months went by, and all I could do was research sight hounds. That's all. I spent like every moment when I wasn't working, sitting there reading about breeds. And one weekend we were just sitting around, and I said, hey, Houndy, there's a lure coursing thing going on over on the ranch over there in Stanley, New Mexico. Let's go check it out. And she didn't want to go, but she reluctantly humored me, and we went. And standing there, and I see these two guys, and they've got they're two beautiful sight hounds, really muscular, smooth dogs. Not the typical feathered Saluki that most people associate with Salukis. And I walk up to him, I strike up a conversation, and it was these two guys, Robert Place and Joe Miner, and they were planning on having a litter later that year. And these were some really nice line of Salukis. They're mostly this mid-bar line, which you may or may not know about, Seth. I don't know.
Actually,
mostly
I do.
Started by Gail Goodman was who lives here in New Mexico. That's her line of Salukis, and these dogs were nearly pure mid-bar, but there was other things in there as well. And we struck up a friendship with these guys, and they offered us a dog, and then we ended up getting two from that litter. And we still have one here. He's 14 years old now, but he's our old Saluki, and that's. We got those two, and that got us more into competitive coursing. And a few years down the line from there, another friend who I've mentioned before, Val Kepler and her husband Steve, who live in Las Cruces, they had these desert bred Salukis, which they got from another person who Mary Beth Rogers. Mm-hmm. And we ended up getting a desert bred dog from Mary Beth, and that opened the door on these desert bred dogs.
So tell us the difference. Tell us the difference, Paul, because I'm very ignorant about this. The different types of dogs. What was it about the dog that you saw that caught your eye? What is a Saluki coursing guy look for in a Saluki?
I've got some rambunctious hounds behind me right now. I don't
That's
know
good.
If you can hear me, or just I'll continue. Well, initially what attracted me to them when I was doing my research was the fact that they're bred for a country that isn't very different from where I live here in New Mexico. Their Salukis are known for their toughness, despite the fact that everyone in this country maybe associates them more with the show ring. But you look at a Saluki compared to a greyhound, and Salukis have these massive feet. Mm-hmm. They've got a lot of bone. They're lean. They're not overly muscled. Who does better in a marathon, or who does better in a 10K? Arnold Schwarzenegger, or some guy who's a track runner. They just have the body type to maintain. Mm-hmm. Speed and distance over. They're mid-distance runners. They're not endurance runners. Endurance runners would be your English pointers and English setters. Those guys can run 20 miles an hour for
plot
9 hours straight. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Blue tick hound.
Yeah, you know exactly what I mean.
Yep.
And these, I was just so intrigued. It just seemed like these were the perfect type dog for New Mexico, where I live. And I have a little bit of bias. In the falconry world, there's a lot of captive breeding that goes on. So people breed falcons, and there's one falcon that in particular that's just outstanding. And it's a cross between a gyr falcon, which is a big Arctic falcon, and a peregrine falcon, which is, you've probably heard of them. They live in, pretty much every continent around the world, and they're
fish hawks.
They're duck hawks.
Yep.
They're not fish hawks.
Yep. You're right. Yep. My mistake.
No, fish hawk, that's an osprey.
Yep. You're right. Yep.
But anyway, so I mean, they've made this artificial hybrid called the gyr peregrine, and they're outstanding game hawks. But to me, they're not interesting because there's no natural history behind a gyr peregrine. It's a man-made thing. And that's kind of how I landed on Salukis, as opposed to, you can go with the hybrids. You can go with the gyr, or with a greyhound Saluki, and they're outstanding animals. They're beautiful, and they run like the wind. They've got great speed and great bottom. But to me, it was more challenging to. I've always been told that Salukis were slower and they don't catch game. But then I started, the more research I did into North American Salukis, about people who are running them over here, the more people I found who are catching hares on a regular basis. And I just wanted to tap into that. And, and I think with these, man, I'm taking a long circle here to get back to desert bred dogs.
That's all right.
So these desert bred dogs are dogs that are less than 3 generations out from their country of origin. So the particular line of dogs that I have are all they're quote unquote Persian dogs. So they come from mostly the region in the world that we think of as Kurdistan, which encompasses Turkey, Iraq, and parts of Iran, I believe. And they're still used over there for their practice of putting meat on the table, hunting hares. We're not talking about dogs from the Arabian Peninsula here, ones that Salukis are distributed all the way historically from northern Africa all the way into China, and they're dispersed along the Silk Road. And I think I've heard them described as a land race, a breed of dog that's kind of specialized for the regions in which they are, where they're being bred. So if you go up into the mountains, more of the dogs have slightly different bodies, and of course, crossbreeding has gone on over the millennia with these dogs, but they're an ancient breed that were created by humans, but yet they're still relatively pure, and that's what's really turned me on to them. And since discovering this line of dogs, these Kurdish dogs, they're extremely gregarious. Salukis have a reputation of being aloof. My dogs are not. I mean,
not at all. Yeah, your dogs are so friendly.
They're super friendly. They're a lot more biddable than a lot of what people think of as Salukis. They're hounds, though. I mean, we all know what hounds are like. Hounds, they're not herding dogs. They're not
a Labrador.
Yeah, they're not a Labrador. They do have a level of aloofness, but I just love them. I mean, and they run great. They look good, and
what really attracted me to your desert bred dogs is that, like you were saying earlier, the power of some long dogs, especially ones that lean towards greyhounds, they're too powerful. The way I describe it, for our desert is rough. I know in those pictures it just looks like a sea of grass, but there's potholes and rocks and barbed wire, and there's just lots of obstacles out there on the prairie. And the greyhound heavy long dogs, the dogs that have heavy greyhound genetics, they just get chewed up out there on that prairie. And every Saluki that's a good Saluki that I've seen can just last on that prairie for years. And I want to get away from vet bills and move back into running more rabbits as much as possible. And so, although my 2 long dogs are amazing at catching rabbits, they are already starting to show signs of wear and tear from the prairie, and they're only 3 years old. And so to me, although yes, their catch rate is very high, I want to have a very high catch rate with an animal that's much more designed for the prairie. And like you were saying, the Salukis' lighter bodies, they don't have that like the way I describe it is I want a Baja truck. I don't want a Ferrari to go across the prairie. You wouldn't want to bomb across a grassland in a Lamborghini. You want to bomb across the prairie in a Baja truck. And those desert bred dogs that you breed and that are in the circle that you associate with, you guys have the best desert dogs, period. And so I'm really excited to be a part of that. Like you were saying, the Salukis, that their joints are bigger and stronger. Their feet are so much more robust than a greyhound's. A greyhound has these very powerful feet that dig powerfully into the earth, but those heavily arched toes with all that muscle get sprained a lot easier than a dog with heavy foot pads that a Saluki has. They have a lot more cushion and just not so much of that raw power that they can just not destroy themselves. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. It's just you need to tone that horsepower down and build up that frame a little bit. And so that's why the Salukis do so well here in the desert. And I'm very excited to be a part of them and see them run. They're great. And I also kind of wanted to ask you, Paul, why do you love coursing? Like what drew you to a rabbit race? I always ask this to every houndsman I talk to, because I say, why do you love a coon race? What is it about bear hunting that you love so much? But tell me what you love the most about coursing.
I guess it's the jackrabbit, really.
Me too.
and seeing what the dog, just the match of the dog and the hare, and because I saw it, I was exposed to it more through falconry than coursing for several years, and you never see the rabbit go into that fifth gear when there's a hawk chasing it, because they don't need it. They can use maneuverability to get away from a hawk. I mean, hawks catch a lot of rabbits, but they
the good ones are smart.
Yeah, the good ones are smart, but you get the raw speed when there's a dog behind it, and those jacks can just move out. Some of them, the best ones they get up and they just make a straight line, and the dogs get further and further behind, and it's like those are the most boring courses out there. But you just nod your head and you thank God that there's jacks like that out there to continue to breed.
Yes, because if they're making your speed dog look like a dummy, imagine what they do to a coyote. I mean, they're leaving a different zip code with that coyote behind it. Yeah. And those are the ones. I've had rabbits that can just straight away line out from our greyhounds. So, like, how does that happen?
I know. I've seen it many times. No, that's the truth. But yeah, I mean, and then the other part of the coursing is when the dogs are doing work on the hare, when they're turning the hare, and they're working as a team, or they're working with dogs that they've never run with before, and you see a chemistry build up on the spot. And because I do a lot of open field coursing, competitive coursing, and the dogs will run with dogs that they don't know. My dogs will run with dogs they don't know, and you get to see a different dynamic develop sometimes, which is really pretty interesting. So,
and all at high speed.
All at high speed. Yeah. All at high speed. Yep.
Yeah. I run with the same pack constantly for the most part. And so I have the exact opposite of that spectrum. I get to see that magic that happens with dogs that have hunted together for years. And it's amazing. And I put some articles up on our Patreon account of, I have so many pictures of our dogs running because we pursue them in the buggy, and you can watch them do those formations at high speed, and it's just awesome. I love it. So, I mean, it's just, I always love to ask people why they love the sport. And with coursers, every time it's the jackrabbit. Right. They're just such a neat little animal, and so undeserved of their vermin reputation. You know what I mean?
Oh,
it's just,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, when you hunt them with dogs, you get to see them so majestic. Okay, full disclosure, I grew up shooting a lot of rabbits. You know what I mean? Like when I was a kid, that's what you did. You just went out there and you just hunt rabbits. And now I can't even aim a gun at one. Like it hurts my soul to even put crosshairs on one, because I'm like, I am denying you the chance to give a great rabbit race. And so, I mean, they're just unbelievable. And they're much better than people think they are. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Sure.
I could gush about them all day. They're just too cool. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I do a lot, probably the majority of the hunting I do is just free coursing with my dogs. And we'll go out, well, once a week, we'll take them all out.
How many dogs do you have, Paul?
Well, I've got 11 dogs. I've got 10 Salukis and a Jack Russell Terrier, and we'll usually bring like 9 Salukis out. So I've got dogs that range in age from 4 months to 14 years. And the young and the old are definitely, they walk by my wife and I, and we'll walk for a couple hours. And the younger dogs are out there working the brush. So they're not on leads. They're just out there hunting. And I actually really enjoy that, because to me, it really shows how these dogs interact as hunting dogs. Mm-hmm. You let them out of the truck and they run helter skelter for 10 minutes, just burning off energy. Then we start, a nice slow walk out through the fields, and I've got 2 dogs that'll work out 150 to 200 yards, and then all the other dogs are somewhere between them and me. And the way they hunt is they take a few steps and they stop and they watch the other dogs, and then they take a few steps in different direction and they watch the other dogs. And because they're hunting as a group, waiting for one of them to flush a hare.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain in my podcast, is that sight hounds, they're not like a hound that's sniffing and baying and moving across the ground like a scent hound. They're like, they're so vigilant, and they walk and watch. They're just waiting, because their prey, they've learned that their prey isn't just going to be scented out. They know that their prey is going to bolt. And so they're on that hair trigger, pun intended. Yep. They're just waiting for that moment of that little guy to just burst out of the grass at 100 miles an hour, and they're going to take off. So yeah, they walk not tepidly, but they're just like their muscles are quivering, and they're just walking so diligently as they move through that grass. And it's really cool to see. And with a big pack like yours, I bet it's even cooler to see that, because I'm only running a few, two or three. There's
some parallels there with like the Feist, a squirrel dog, because they use all of their senses to do their job. They use their eyes, their ears, and some nose, some lines. And that's what I've heard being exposed to these side hounds, coursing dogs that you guys are running. It sounds like they use all their senses to do their job.
They do. They really do. Yep.
It's such a difficult quarry to locate. Hares give off a lot less scent than a rabbit does. And so they are just so good at not being killed. They are tough to find, and those dogs are really working to even find one. And the best way is to just stumble onto one.
How do you know that, Seth? How do you know that hares give off less scent than a rabbit?
Well, I'm gonna pretend that it's science and that I'm not out there sniffing the ground for them. Well, there are actually some data. There is some data and peer-reviewed studies that show that they actually do give off less scent as a predator avoidance strategy, obviously.
So have you seen it personally, like putting down a scent hound, running a scent hound on hares versus running a scent hound on rabbits?
Okay, so no, because no one hunts rabbits with trailing hounds here. Okay. Because the sand doesn't hold scent at all here, really.
Right.
But because when there's cottontails in the area, my quartering dog, my bird dog mix, she can zone in on a true rabbit, not a hare, instantly. Mm-hmm. Like as soon as she's downwind of a rabbit under a creosote, under a mesquite, or in a hole, she'll go to it directly. But with hares, she's got to be close, very close, and downwind. That's the only way she'll discover them. Otherwise, she'll walk right past them. I've seen her walk past them. So,
because I was getting ready to call you out and say, call BS on that. But now that you've got some actual data to back it up, I guess I'll back off.
I'll call BS on it.
Really? Let's hear it, Paul.
Well, for years we ran. I had a Brittany that ran with our coursing dogs for years, and then she got old and passed away, and we got an English setter, who my son now keeps. But both of them would point jacks, and both would point cottontails as well. More. I would say a lot more jacks were flushed by actual just sort of flushing.
Sure.
Than pointing, but many times either of those dogs would lock up on point to a jack, and my sight hounds would honor the point, and they'd come up behind, and then she'd go in and flush, and boom, I'll go off after.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that Penny couldn't find them. She actually found a bunch. I mean, I've had buddy like Justin's been out with us, and she found 6 in an hour by scenting them, not by stumbling them. I'm just saying they're much harder to scent.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, he's going to start beating us up with science if you don't watch out, Paul.
Yeah, I know.
Don't diss Penny. I'm coming at you, bud.
These smart guy millennials,
Yeah.
Yeah, when he starts coming at Penny's nose, I'm going to bring it like a freight train. So, but anyway, yeah, I was just, I love to see when people run scent dogs after the hares too. Paul, it's not that common. At least I've never seen a lot of it, but maybe you have.
Yeah, I'd really love to get there's a lot of talk these days about working Cocker Spaniels, and they're real close working, and they're flushing dogs, and they've got great noses on them, and I think one of those would be perfect for this kind of work.
What about your Jack Russell Terrier, man? I've seen that little old man. He's nasty.
Yeah, no, he's too short ranging. He's a great dog, but he's not the best hunting dog we've ever had. So
he's a world-class growler.
He's a world-class growler. He's a good mouser. He catches a lot of mice around the yard.
Oh, sure.
I'll send Roxy out there, my boxer.
Oh yeah.
You know what? I have fun with her, and I'm going to take this right down a rabbit path, not a jackrabbit path. It's a legitimate rabbit path. But yesterday she added to her resume weasel dog. She actually caught a weasel in a brush pile while I was fishing up at our pond yesterday. So that was pretty awesome. Cool. Took some pictures of that. But it's amazing. I think when you're talking about, I hear Paul talking about his dogs pointing jackrabbits or hares. I think it's just they get used to, this is what I'm here for. So the slightest bit of scent, once they've done it a few times and they've got that reward or that affirmation for doing their job, now when they get put on the ground, and dogs are smarter than we give them credit for. You've got your Salukis with you, you've got your bird dog with you, and you see a bird dog with you, and now that bird dog knows, I need to be laser focused on this, because then fun is going to happen. Do you think that's accurate?
I definitely do. Yes.
Okay. Me too. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And yeah, Roxy the weasel dog, my pointer pit bull cross, she won't point, but she will go after a varied amount of game. And over the years, she's had a pretty wide repertoire of things to go after. So, I get what you're feeling, Chris. It's fun no matter what they're going after.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, well, man, Paul, I could just go on for hours with you, buddy. When we went to your house, man, I had a hard time leaving, honestly. I felt like a kid in a candy store running around your place looking at all your stuff, your birds and your dogs. And I was so surprised at how friendly your dogs are, because I've only seen Salukis that are like really shy and really like not feral, but you know what I mean? Just not.
Oh, I do.
I walked in your house and all of them were like, "Can I get in your lap?" And I was like, "Go away!" But they were so cool and yeah, I'm very excited to get into the Saluki world more. I mean, I've seen a lot of Saluki long dogs, and my friend and mentor Justin has some really good running Salukis that I'm really fond of. So I'm very excited to add some diversity to our Saluki game. So
will you guys indulge me on a few questions here?
Go for it.
Yeah.
So Paul, you mentioned that your desert bred dogs, and you might have to correct me here, but you classified them as not being more than 3 generations removed from their country of origin. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So how many generations of your Salukis have you been breeding since you found those original desert bred dogs?
How many generations? I don't actually breed litters here. My dogs, we provide stud services to other desert bred dogs.
Okay.
So we have I have Gen 1s and Gen 2s here. And I also have a Gen 3, which is the puppy that I have now and that Seth just got from me.
Okay.
So those dogs are actually, the Gen 3s are, Salukis are a funny breed because the stud book isn't closed, the AKC stud book.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a way to bring country of origin blood into the stud book, but it has to be the 3rd generation. So there's this whole separate stud book, this desert bred stud book.
Okay. So Seth, how many generations is your puppy removed? How many generations would Seth's puppy be removed from, the original dogs running on the Persian?
Let's see. So
I believe he's Gen 3, right?
Yeah, three generations.
Yeah, he's Gen 3.
3 generations away.
He's AKC registerable, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, yep. He's a American, I guess.
Gotcha. So as you are, obviously you can't, maybe you can. It seems to me that it would be very hard to keep going back to, Kurds and finding these dogs and getting them here and doing that legwork. So is your goal to be able to breed true to type in the United States of what the Kurds are producing in the original dogs? Is that your goal?
Well, but just by the fact that we're not over there, we're not going to have the same dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Because our choice in breeding would be different than what they would choose to breed, probably. So, but yeah, that's the goal. Their goal is to, if we're all lovers of dogs, if you've seen photographs of like what's happened to German Shepherd dogs.
That's where I was wanting to take this. Go for it. Yeah,
so the German Shepherds have been ruined by the show ring. For Schutzhound work now, they use Malinois,
right? And
the Belgian dogs. The German Shepherds are just a breed that's, I hope someone resurrects them because they're such excellent dogs. But that sloping top line where the rear end, where's the function in that? There is no function. It's an abomination. It's disgusting to me. And you look in the fancy, quote unquote fancy magazine or publications of like Salukis, and they've, these show ring dogs are all like, they're skinny and they're real thin boned, and they've got these big long fringes of hair on their tail and their legs, and it's like, how in the world is that dog supposed to catch a gazelle in the desert?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one part of the Saluki world, but the other part of the Saluki world, and it mostly exists in the American West, in California, in New Mexico in particular, and some in Arizona, Nevada. There are people who are dedicated to hunting these dogs, and there's some very well developed American lines which are excellent, but kind of the goal of bringing these dogs over from the Middle East is, God, that part of the world is, look what's happened over there. Look what happened to Syria. Syria had some of the best Salukis in the world, and now there's probably virtually nothing left just because the country's been destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a large part of what the mission is to bring these dogs into this country, so protect some of that. And the other part of the mission is to improve, and it's hard to, with the Saluki establishment to, because we're considered pretty fringy what we're doing, bringing these dogs in and having the separate registry. And then these Generation 3 dogs, like the one Seth's got and the one I've got now, you get these into AKC, and then you get them as an AKC registered dog. Then you have to get someone who's interested in this dog, who sees the good of this dog, and then breed it again to get the genes to propagate out into the AKC lines.
Right.
So it's a multi in my mind, it's kind of a multi-pronged, reasons for doing this.
And I like what I heard, as far as preservation of the historical aspects of what the Salukis' job is. That's awesome. So I can see the reason I brought this up is because you mentioned Cocker Spaniels. How hard is it to find a Cocker Spaniel?
Right.
Absolutely. Something that was once an actual working hunting dog that turned into this little blonde-haired fat dog that is obnoxious, that can't find its own feed dish.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, you know what? And there's a group on Facebook, and I hate Facebook's a pretty good reference, even though it's a real pain in the neck sort of thing.
Right.
It's called Falconry Dogs USA or something like that, because falconers are also dog people, most of them anyway. And there's lots of discussion in there about working Cocker Spaniels, and there are several really good lines in this country and several really good kennels in this country breeding top-notch dogs.
I had no idea. I thought it was like finding a unicorn now, really.
Exactly. Well, and it's all news to me too. I mean, and they're nice sized dogs too. They range like 20 to 25 pounds, which is really a good sized animal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're, you don't, I like big dogs, but boy, let's face it. I mean, keeping a whole bunch of big dogs is costs a lot more, and it's a lot more work than having some smaller dogs.
Yep. And that's the thing. Oh, sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just also thinking that, like, for a finder, I like the finders being small because, like you were just saying, I like the bill being cheaper for a dog that's not catching jackrabbits.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and Paul, go ahead, Chris.
No, finish your thought, because I want to get back and follow up on a couple things I have. But finish your thought, Seth.
Oh, I was just saying, Chris, you should start a kennel of working boxers.
Hey, we're restoring it. We're restoring it right here. She's
weasel hounds. Yeah. All right, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
So, how selective are you in puppy placement, Paul?
Pretty selective.
I mean, like snobby, selective background. Send me references before you get one of my dogs. I mean, seriously, how selective are you?
Well, we want a commitment that the dogs aren't going to be used. You have to agree to a breeding contract. So you're not just going to breed the dog you're not going to breed the dog without serious discussions with the whole sort of, we call ourselves a cult.
That's fine. Yeah.
In this little group. I mean, there's plenty of other people who have desert bred Salukis, but this little group that I'm a part of, and that Seth has a dog from now, it's more highly selective in where the dogs go. You have to agree not to breed it. You have to agree not to make crossbreeds. Don't outcross them to a greyhound. And we're really, really looking for working homes. Mm-hmm. So people who are going to take their dog out and hunt it, and be willing to share their experiences, because we're trying to get more people involved and interested in this. But, like I was, the double-edged sword of recruitment kind of thing again comes up with that. I mean, if you're into doing, competitive open field coursing, that's also a good thing, which is it gives a lot of positive. It gets a lot of play in the breed world.
Yeah,
put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't mean to put you on the defensive by using the word snobby, and there's a reason why I use that, because a lot of times people aren't selective enough, and I've been accused. I've made crosses before and turned people down for pups, or I want to know. I would rather give a pup away to somebody I know and trust than sell 50 pups and just let them scatter to the wind and not know what happens to them. And I wonder if there isn't something, that a message that could at least be somewhat considered by other hound hunting communities, that there is some value in that. If you're trying to keep quality and performance at the top of your list, how valuable that could be. And breeding contracts, I want to ask you about that. So do they have to, say Seth takes this Saluki, he develops him into this, what he feels like, he calls you up and he says, Paul, you aren't going to believe it, this Saluki's unbelievable, and she's coming into heat, she's at the right age, I'd really like to breed her. Does he need to bring that Saluki? Do you need to see that Saluki go, or do you take a committee out, or is it anything that structured?
It probably wouldn't happen on a whim like that. It would be more of a planned thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, the dog's developing well and it's showing real promise, and it's, you don't want to breed them when they're too young. I mean, you want to breed them, the bitches maybe not until they're 5 or 6 and they've got some miles under their feet, and the dogs until they're 4 or 5 maybe, and so it would be more of a longer term, like planning on how the breeding's going to happen, and trying to keep looking at the a lot of these dogs don't have pedigrees that go back very far, the desert bred ones, but
right.
Looking at the region the dog came from, or trying to maximize making sure you're breeding the best to the best, and the
goal is the best rabbit catchers with a good solid pedigree as well. That's, purpose
right,
bred.
and as far as we can tell, a clean bill of health.
Definitely.
Most of these dogs will get Dopplers done on their heart at a couple years old, because sight hounds have the tendency, their circulatory system is different than other dogs. They've got bigger hearts. They tend to have heart problems, and that's like the one genetic flaw that shows up in running dogs is their heart. Some of them, as they get older, they get what's the enlargement of the heart called? I can't remember. Cardiomyopathy, right? And and that's usually starts to show itself around 5 or 6 years old. So you can, if you get a Doppler done at that age, you've got a pretty good idea if you're going to have a dog that's got a solid heart, or one that's going to crap out and the dog's going to die in the field. I had one of my early dogs. We were out running. It was a long dog, and the dogs ran out after a hare, and they went over a hill and we didn't see what happened, and half of them came back and this one dog didn't come back, and we went out there and he was just laying there, cold.
Wow.
And
that's sad.
It's basically it was a heart had given out on him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you try to eliminate stuff like that. You're trying to minimize stuff like that.
Right. Just like hip dysplasia in the German Shorthair, the German Shepherd, and but Alan Halata, the vet from California, actually talked about cardiomyopathy and starting to pop up in Labradors now. So, and it always comes from lack of discipline breeding,
right.
and so I'm a big proponent. I support what you're doing there, Paul. We got to be stingy. these dogs weren't made to lay by the fireplace or to be somebody's showpiece. They were bred with a purpose and a job, and it's our job as breeders and humans to protect that, to keep them functional in this world.
Right.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people, if I could take it a step further, Paul, a lot of people would be like, oh, the Saluki cult people, they're like crazy because they're not breeding dogs until they're 6 and they're being too stingy with their dogs. And after getting to know you, Paul, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to get to know you. I really wanted to learn your style of thinking. It's so different than other aspects of hunting community. And so, yeah, I fully understand it, and I totally agree. I think being, like Chris was saying, being more stingy about where dogs go, I think is a good thing. And I've learned, after I got your dog, people already coming out of the woodwork being like, I can't wait to see a cross off that dog. And I'm like, well, it's not happening.
Well, so. I'll take a shot here because I've lived in this world so long. But when you get and I love the people that are running our kennel clubs. They're good friends of mine. I've worked with them on several things.
I'm losing you guys.
Are you losing us, Paul? Hello.
Yeah.
You're breaking up, Chris, a little bit.
Okay. Well,
can you hear me, buddy?
Yeah, I can.
I can hear you.
All right.
Okay.
So where I was going with that was, the kennel clubs have done things that, and I'm not creating hate and discontent here, but when you start talking about super stakes and things that you guys wouldn't know on the sidehound side of it, reproducers lists and super stakes, it's all caused these breeders to produce a lot of puppies and get them out there. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you about the highly discriminate breeding of these dogs. And so with this breeding practice that you're using, what is your success rate, Paul? I mean, what do you realistically, how many functional dogs do you plan to get out of a litter?
Oh, functional dogs out of a litter?
Yep. Ones that'll run a rabbit like you want them to.
Oh, I've never, that's a tough one. I've never really given that a whole lot of thought. Geez.
We never said this was going to be easy.
I've never even really considered that aspect. I don't know. To me, I hope, physically they should all be to a pretty high standard. Mm-hmm. The difference that I've seen and what makes you go from a good dog to a great dog is what's in the dog's head.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that takes a while to develop and to really know what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how many people they put a 2-month-old puppy in front of them and they say, oh, that's a great dog. But, 4 years down the line, you ask them how that dog turned out and then, he's good, nothing out of the ordinary. But,
right.
How do you tell when you have an outstanding dog? I mean, I don't know from the get-go how I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, I have a dog here that we got because we have his the sire of the dog that we got is I have one of his brothers, a littermate to him, and we picked him up at 4 or 5 months old, and I didn't really have much hope for him. I didn't have expectations at all, put it that way. And that dog went out in the field the first time at 5 months old and just tore butt. I mean, just screamed across the prairie. And he's just so laser focused on hunting and so competitive with other dogs. He's run against faster dogs and they'll lead out and be in front of him, and you can just see his brain kicking in and just say, I'm done with this. I'm done with being behind these dogs. And he goes and finds some other gear and goes passing them, and starts working the hare and catches the hare on his own. And that's what I want in a dog. And how you get that, man, I don't know if that's just I don't know if you can breed for that. I really don't.
Well, I hope you can. I mean, that's the way we've bred horses, and that's the way we've bred performance dogs and different things like that. But
well, Seth's got a puppy from that dog right now. So.
We'll find out. I'm about as outgoing as it gets with them, so you'll find out.
Yep.
But we've got to face facts. I mean, how many secretariats are there?
I know.
How many Michael Jordans are there? I mean, taking it to the human aspect, how many Albert Einsteins?
However, you could counter that by saying that Michael Jordans and like Albert Einsteins, and humans haven't been selectively crossed for thousands of years to make these super athletes. So I guess if you were taking that direction, maybe.
That's a good point. That is a very valid point. I'm just trying to put something that maybe we can relate to. And probably not the best. But definitely secretariats, but they've been trying to reproduce that, and we've never been able to do it. Horse breeders have never been able to do it. So.
It's true.
But
I'd like to think any puppy that Pronto throws would be a superstar like him, but I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely breeding is one of those things that we touch on from time to time, but we've really never drilled down into it. And I can see a need to continue this conversation in the future with other breeders to find out how to increase our success rates and things like that. So maybe there is some value. I was kind of dissing PKC and UKC for historic breeders lists and super stakes, but I'll digress a little bit. Maybe there's something to it that we need to look at and I'll tell you somebody that could really talk to it would be Guy Ormiston. He's a blue tick breeder, BBCHA editor for their Blue Book, but he is a student of breeding and successes and things like that, and it'd be interesting for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, that's a world that I need to get more fluent in because I'm just starting out. So I've never bred a litter of sight dogs. I mean, I'm way into it and I pay attention closely, but I'm about to get a lot more lessons. Let's just say that as the years go on. One
of the things I see, and we're getting off of hounds here, but you watch. I've seen litters of German Shorthair puppies that were selectively bred from performance dogs. And they've got so much instinct, even at 6 to 8 weeks old, where you put a wing out in front of them and drag it along, and
I've seen videos of that.
They all lock up. All together they lock up on it. Even Labradors and Chesapeake Bay Retriever breeds. You throw something and they naturally want to go get it, and then it's up to us. So, when I kind of cornered you there, Paul, about how many of your dogs are performing at levels that you want, there's a lot of variables that go into that.
Right.
You get a superstar at 5 months old, and then he goes to somebody else, and then they don't hunt him as hard as he should be, or handle him the way he should be handled, and so he becomes an average dog.
Yep.
And I always go back to my buddy Mike Cawley, the plot breeder from Louisiana. He'll have people come to his house and say, he'll have a litter of plot puppies there, and they'll ask him, they'll say, well, which one do you think is going to be the best dog? And his answer is always the same. He says, the one you hunt the most.
I love that saying. I was going to say it. You beat me to it.
Yep. The one you hunt the most. And, I joke around about Roxy. I put my boxer, I put stuff, but the reason she does the stuff she does, catching possums and weasels and snakes and whatever, is because she's with me all the time and she's out there exposed to it. So same way with my hounds. If I hunt them enough and I put them in the right situations, they're going to perform.
Mm-hmm. Diablo's looking good.
Yeah, but again, we've got turkey season in full swing. He's really starting to hit that, but I'm very conscientious about hunting right now because there are so many people out turkey hunting. And no, they're not hunting at night, but they get all uptight if they hear a hound treed back there where they just roosted a turkey. So kind of being discreet and
good thing
trying to be responsible right now and be considerate of our turkey hunters. Have got 2 weeks to hunt, 2.5 weeks to hunt in Indiana. You know, I can run hounds all but about 4 weeks a year here, so I can lay back a little bit and work on some.
I agree.
Stuff.
And I think that's a great line to take because here in New Mexico, you know, the draw results just came out for our big game hunting, and everyone's posting their sob stories on Facebook about how they didn't draw nothing. And I'm like, good thing I got dogs because we can hunt anytime we want. Yeah. But we always lay off an antelope season so that our antelope hunters can go out there and enjoy the prairie without our dogs zipping around. And I think that's a great way to keep relations really positive between us. So definitely, I like that.
Yep, I think we as Houndsman XP, we've got the ability to get that message out there, you know, and talk about that sort of thing because we've got to find ways to build bridges instead of put up walls between different sporting groups, whether it's scent hound, side hound, hound guys versus antelope hunters, or whatever it is. We've got to find ways to build bridges and do that sort of thing. So,
totally agree.
Let's have we got everything covered that you had in your outline, Seth?
Yes, sir.
Paul, you got any final thoughts? Anything that's eating at you that you want to get out there to hunters in the United States? Don't be shooting hawks. Don't be shooting hawks. Anything like that?
Don't be shooting hawks, please. Don't be shooting hawks. They play a vital role in all our ecosystems, and man, they're such fierce predators. I mean, you hold one in your hand, you have one on your fist that flies out of a tree and lands on your glove, or I hunt with falcons and you put one up and it goes up to 1,000 feet and comes down at 120 miles an hour and, kills a mallard out of the sky. And it's, stuff you've got to see.
So awesome.
Stuff you got to see, and man, you can't see it if you go out and shoot them. And, especially turkey season is a really dangerous time for hawks because hawks are nesting and some of them become defensive with their nests. And, it's easy to mistake their acts of aggression as purely aggressive when they're just protecting their home territory, So if you're a turkey hunter, please don't shoot a hawk.
I've got a question for you. So
sure.
Back east here, and I'm sure you get the same thing out west. I'm sure I'm not special because where I live, but chickens out in the yard, red-tailed hawk sitting on a limb, preying on my chickens. As a master falconer, what do I tell my wife when I pull in the driveway and I see her staying in the driveway with a .22 rifle wanting to shoot a hawk?
Man,
what can she do to mitigate that?
Well,
I know.
keep your chickens in.
No, you tell her to go get a noose trap and catch it and tame it.
Exactly.
If seriously, if you've got, there's a lot of falconers in Indiana. If you need connections, I can help you out. But if you have a nuisance bird like that, you can just I can steer you, or you can get on. You can Google Indiana Falconers Association, contact them, or go on Facebook and say, I've got a nuisance hawk. Is there a falconer that can come and trap it and move it for me?
Nice. Well,
and they'll do that. I've done that many times for folks, and because and a lot of times, smaller hawks will fly into big box stores like Costco or Home Depot or something, and we get called out pretty often to go and trap these birds out of those places. So.
Yeah. Well, I was a conservation officer for 28 years, so I had to mitigate a lot of those conflicts between my wife and the hawks. So.
Oh yeah, no, I can imagine. Yep.
And taking her to jail wasn't an option. So.
No, I know.
It was tempting, it was tempting, but long game it wasn't an option.
Nah, it wouldn't work out well. Sweet.
Seth, yeah.
Sir?
Seth, what you got?
Well, like I said, we had covered a lot of my outline, and we covered a lot of ground I wasn't expecting to, which was great. I love when that happens. I just, Paul, I wanted to, the birds was something that I thought our listeners and because when I came to your house, I was just staring in your cages, kind of frothing at the mouth. And so you're gonna when we run our pups when I run my pup with your pack, I want to come out with you at duck season, and I want to see you fly some birds after some ducks. Is that cool?
Oh yeah, no, I usually mix them all up,
And I told these guys, I told Chris and Steve and Lauren, I told them they better get down here this fall and watch our dogs run. So maybe we can all get together in a big group at 380 and run. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. You told a story in your interview about a golden eagle coming in on your pack. I can tell a quick story about a buddy of mine and I were out. This is probably 10 years ago. And we were out on the bench, just you and I discussed this area just east of the Manzano, just west of the Manzano Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
We were up on that bench, but further north up by Tomé. And, we were just out BSing and walking, and I had a couple Salukis out and he had a couple long dogs out. And, we're walking out there on the flats and a jack gets up and the dogs take off after it, and we're watching the dogs work with the jack, and this prairie falcon comes in, which is a native falcon to the American West, about the size of a peregrine, so about crow size, a little bit bigger, and is following our dogs behind the hare. And we're like, oh, look, check it out, this is so cool. And and the prairie falcon took up. Okay, I'll get off real quick. And we watched him do that for the next 3 courses that we got up. That prairie falcon came in and killed the rabbit each time and didn't take possession of it.
Oh, crazy.
And we were trying to get back to the truck without flushing rabbits because this prairie falcon was just, doing it for the pure sport of it. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to convey that last little story.
Is that your favorite course of all time, Paul? I kind of love to ask this of every hound hunter, and some guys give me a really just kind of like, oh yeah, but what's your favorite course that you've had with your dogs? What happened?
Yeah, that's right up there. I mean, that's probably the best. That's
pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
It was pretty amazing. I mean, we thought, well, we left the first hare out in the field because it's like, well, we'll just let the falcon take possession of it so it can eat. And it wasn't hunting to feed itself. It was hunting because it liked to hunt, which is an interesting thing, I think,
That was cool. He's just enjoying watching the dogs. And that eagle, I got the story on the Patreon account for everyone with all the pictures and stuff. And Paul, I want to have this for the record, and then I can stop badgering you. But for the record, you've never hunted from a rig before. And so this fall, I really want to get you in my rig. What do you have any preconceived thoughts of the rig? Because you've never hunted from one. I just kind of want to know from someone who's walked. I've walked a lot. Matter of fact, I walk, I'd say about 40% of the time. What do you think? Are you excited? Do you have any apprehensions?
Yeah. No, I'm excited to do it. It's not something that would work for me up here because of the country I hunt in. There's too many fences and it's too hilly.
Ah, gotcha.
But yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing it.
I'm excited to have you on it. I think you're going to love it.
I'm sure it's going to be fun. I'm sure I'll be hooked immediately. So
yeah, ask Chris Mason. She walked her whole life, got in the rig. She's like, there's no comparison because you get to watch your dogs hunt in a way that you've dreamt of. Yeah.
Oh, I know. She's told me many times already.
I would ask,
so have I.
I would ask for a copy of the liability insurance policy first.
We were on 2 wheels last time. I tell you, we had that rabbit and we were going and the rabbit juked hard with the dogs. We're 50, 60 yards away. And it's just instinct. When the rabbit turns, I turn the rig, and we were going probably 45. And so when we got turned, and I learned a valuable lesson there. Slow down a little bit. Yeah. We were having a good time. So I'm going to show Chris and Lauren and Steve a good time this fall when we're going 50 across the prairie behind those speed dogs. So yeah. Anyway,
well, that sounds good, man. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. If you guys come down, because I can line up my buddy here who runs sight hounds and flies a falcon for jackrabbits. So it's
nice.
That's
Sounds
a definite
cool.
must see as well.
Definitely, that'll be a first for me too. So I'm in.
Well, Paul, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day and sharing your experience and your knowledge with the Sighthounds. It was extremely interesting for me. I think we got a look at the falconry side that brings a whole different aspect to our houndsman lifestyle here. Something that it's always cool to talk to people from other parts of the country that may do things a little bit different, and pretty cool stuff. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I've really enjoyed our friendship, and I look forward to many more years. And I can't wait to get up there and see some stuff. And I guess wrapping it up here at Houndsman XP, how we always do. You follow your hounds, and I'll follow mine. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.